Evening and welcome. My name is JD Ross and I'm Associate Dean of Admission at Hamilton College. And it's my pleasure to have you with us tonight for our Virtually Hamilton event, exploring Hamilton's open curriculum. I know that this has been a bit of a strange college search process, trying to work your way through this in the pandemic. And so this Virtually Hamilton series of events for you to interact with us online is a way to get to know the college in this difficult time, and we're really glad that you can avail yourself of this. Well, we are open and welcoming visitors to campus for campus tours and information sessions. We also know that sometimes it might be difficult to travel at this point in time, and so that's what this Virtually Hamilton series is here. Just another way for you to get to know us and for us to let you know some of the things that make us unique and worthy of your consideration during the college search process. So tonight's event, where we're going to discuss the open curriculum here and how that sets Hamilton apart as we address our students' academic journeys. And I've got a group of students here today who are going to talk about that with you. So my goal for us today, and for what I would like you to come out of this with, is that I'd like you to understand how the open curriculum works at Hamilton. We're going to have our students share some examples how the open curriculum has given them the flexibility to study what they love across the liberal arts at Hamilton. And we're going to hear, personally their experiences, and not only in the classroom, but with faculty, with advising, with research, and with some of the things that connect the curriculum across the college, outside of the classroom as well. So perhaps as you've been hearing and doing your research in Hamilton, you've heard us talk about studying what you love, right? At Hamilton, we tell you that you can study what you love, be who you are, and find your future. And study what you love, I think, can sometimes be better described as discover what you love, right? There's so much to explore within Hamilton's academic areas, and not necessarily because you have to, but because you want to. And with very few exceptions, which I'll get to here in a minute, we don't have any core courses at Hamilton. We don't have any distribution requirements, right? You may be looking, during your college search, you may be looking at classes that have you have to take a certain first year sequence or a certain sophomore sequence, or a particular set of classes in different areas. We don't have that at Hamilton. You really have the freedom to dive right in if you know what you want to do, or you have the freedom to explore possible areas of interest to you if you're not sure what you want to do. One thing that we do want to make sure that you do is that we would like you to become an effective communicator at Hamilton. We have a focus on turning out graduates who are good writers and good public speakers. And so we ask that you take 3 courses during your time at Hamilton that are writing intensive courses. But in the spirit of the open curriculum, we don't tell you what those courses are, and we have those courses available, peppered kind of throughout different academic areas to meet you where you are. So they're not necessarily in the English department, creative writing department, or the literature department, but those writing courses are peppered throughout. So no matter what your interests are, there's likely to be a writing intensive course there that you can take to fulfill that requirement. Other than that, a few classes with a focus on an oral communications output, and 1 quantitative and symbolic reasoning, or QSR, kind of a fancy way to say math or numbers course. Other than that, you're pretty much in control of what you take. And I think our students will get to this in a minute or so, but to me, one of the best byproducts of this open curriculum is that it puts you in a classroom with other students who want to be there, right? Think about taking a class in an environment where you have distribution requirements or required classes. You might have a classmate who is sitting next to you in class who's there only because they have to kind of check that box of required classes to take. But at Hamilton, every student in the classroom with you is there because they want to be there. And that raises the level of engagement and discussion, right? Not only between you and the faculty member teaching the class, but also between you and your classmates. And I will add that there's a thoughtful layer of advising that helps bring all of this together. I know that when we talk to high school students and we talk about having the freedom to select your own classes, it can be kind of a double-edged sword, because yes, you have the freedom, but you also have the responsibility. And we realize it might be a little nervous making, right? A little daunting to be told that all of a sudden you're responsible for planning out your curriculum. And so we approach this with a pretty careful and tiered system of advising. Advisors who'll provide a sounding board and help you with direction. In addition to your faculty advisors, you're also going to have an ALEX advisor. ALEX is a new program called Advise, Learn, and Experience. It's kind of like an umbrella advising program to help you navigate all of the other options like off-campus study, study abroad, fellowships, experiential learning and research, all things that help complement your classroom learning. Well, I think that's enough from me to get started. I think why you're really here is to hear from our student panelists tonight. So I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves when I call you. Just tell us who you are, where you're from, if you've declared a major and minor, what it is, what campus activities you like to take part in, and maybe something fun about yourself. Let's start with Nick.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick. I am from Delanco, New Jersey. I currently have not declared a major, but I'm probably going to end up going into neuroscience. I am involved in the percussion ensemble, the culinary society, and I'm going to be a resident advisor next year. And then, fun fact, I've been playing piano since I was 5.
All right, thanks, Nick. How about you, Joe?
Hello, I'm Joe. I'm from Miami, Florida. Going to be a government major with a double minor in Africana Studies and Jurisprudence, Law, and Justice Studies. I'm a jitney driver on campus, as well as a TA for 2 classes. And Nicole and I will actually be in DC together next semester as part of our study abroad or study away program. And fun fact, my quarantine specialty is picking up cooking specifically with an air fryer. That's my fun fact.
Yeah, a lot of people turn to cooking or baking during quarantine. Yeah, not a bad thing to do. All right, how about you, Bella?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bella Moses. I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm a creative writing major with a possible minor in women and gender studies. And on campus, I work in a lot of the magazines and literary magazines, things like that. I'm a tour guide here. I also work at the climbing wall, which is really fun. And then a fun fact, I'm going to steal Joe's inspiration, but my quarantine hobby was crochet, and I now have a little crochet Etsy business, and it's been very fun.
Yeah, I think we ought to do one of these virtually Hamiltons on all of our tour guides, quarantine habits and new techniques they picked up. I think it might be fun. All right, Nicole, let's end with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zipporah Ramirez. I am from Miami, Florida. I declared my major to be world politics, and I'm going to double minor in French and Hispanic studies. And on campus, I'm in club soccer. I do some research with some professors. I'm also a TA and a tour guide. And a fun hobby, I think I'm gonna copy Bella and Joe and say that I've become somewhat of a barista at home in the mornings to get up and go on Zoom.
All good things. Thank you all for being here, and you know that our students are really coming from a wide variety of backgrounds, a wide variety of interests. They've got different things they're involved in here, and you'll see how that kind of plays out in their academic journey as well. I've got one more person to introduce you to. She won't be on camera, but my colleague Brenna May is sitting in the chat right now and answering your questions live. So I'm sure if she were here, she'd be waving hello. But if you have any questions, Brenna will be handling those in the chat for us. So let's jump right in. Now, to my panelists, I've got a set of questions I'd like to start with. And we will also answer some questions from the chat a little later in the evening as well. But let's just jump right into it. I would like to know, how did your academic interests begin to guide your college search process when you were kind of beginning that college search process and figuring out what types of colleges you'd like to apply to?
I can take this one to start. So I basically I was just looking. I knew I was interested in creative writing. So first of all, I was looking at schools that had a creative writing major because not all of them do. And Hamilton is one of those. And then I think beyond that, just Hamilton's emphasis on writing in general really drew me to the school. There are not a lot of schools that have the freedom Hamilton has, but also have this focus on writing specifically. And it's not just creative writing either. It's learning just to communicate no matter what you do. And there are a lot of other things I was interested in as well. And I knew that I would like have the freedom to do those other things at Hamilton and be able to focus on writing throughout my academic experience. So I think that was a really big thing for me.
I would also add, for me, I think I always kind of knew I wanted to go into international relations. So I was looking into schools that offered me the opportunity to study abroad and engage in these types of programs that Hamilton has, such as the more domestic ones like Washington, D.C., and then the other partner programs that it has across the world. So I was looking at something that made that financially feasible for me, and Hamilton did that.
So as part of that research, when you first heard about the open curriculum, what were your thoughts? How did that kind of mesh into what you were thinking for your plans for college?
Yeah, I personally always enjoyed smaller schools, right? And hearing some of the stories of my friends, older friends being in classes with 300 people, they didn't necessarily entice me in any way. So having that ability, because you don't like to be pigeonholed into one category where you can only take chemistry classes, only take this. So having that freedom to explore those tiny interests that you have, for me, that was the biggest part of choosing where I wanted to go for college. Because we're not just one, I'm not just solely government, I also enjoy film and art and stuff like that. So for me to be able to explore those freedoms and figure out different parts of myself, that was a big push for me in choosing Hamilton.
So now that you've all been at Hamilton many semesters, or at least a few semesters for some of you, can somebody explain how the open curriculum has impacted the types of courses that you've taken? You have an example maybe of a direction that you headed or a course that you took that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise considered without the open curriculum?
Yeah, I can take this one. I have a kind of weird experience where like right away, like I knew I wanted to do neuroscience right away. So I actually loaded up my entire first year with just STEM courses and major requirements. So I have half of my major requirements done, and I've only been here a year. But now this leaves me in a position for my second year where I'm like kind of needing to slow down because I'll finish my major requirements super early. So instead, I'm trying to just explore and just take a bunch of other courses to see if I want to double major or major and minor or something like that. So I'm taking like music theory, film, economics, just stuff I really wouldn't have otherwise thought of had I not had the ability to take whatever classes I wanted to take.
Yeah, just kind of jumping onto that, I had a similar story. I knew I wanted to do creative writing, but even at Hamilton, the majors are only 10, maybe 12 classes over your all 4 years. So you have 32 total. So you have a ton of time to explore. And I think for me, I ended up finding like a second love in women and gender studies. And I take a lot of classes in that department now. It might even be a minor or double major, but even if it isn't, I still have that opportunity to take all those classes. And then the addition of the thing Joe said about these like tiny random things that I definitely wouldn't have done anywhere else. I've taken like a ballet class. I've taken a class in like ancient magic. I've taken psychology, just all these like small things that I had the opportunity to take. And I've really loved a lot of them, even if I didn't end up majoring or minoring them or anything like that.
So let's talk for a minute about the academic advising component to all of this, right? And maybe let's kind of rewind in your heads back to the beginning when you were first year students. So we typically at Hamilton try to make sure that your faculty advisor is also somebody who's teaching one of your first semester classes, so that it's somebody you get to know pretty well. What was your experience like with that academic advisor when you were first year student, and how did those advising sessions work for you?
Yeah, so Nicole and I actually have the same advisor, and I can say for both of us that it was one of the better experiences in welcoming us to Hamilton. Because for us, he almost became like a friend in a way, and that's what I love about the professors in general at Hamilton, is that they're more than willing to go like beyond the academic professionalism type of thing, to where they're asking you like office hours could run an hour and a half, you end up just talking about random stuff basically. But for us, like we would go over to our professor's house, our advisor's house for dinner or pumpkin carving, like around Halloween time. And that's not random. There's multiple times where other students are really getting to know their advisors and their professors, and they sit down and take the time, carve out some time in their day to really map out your life, because they understand the gravity of what they say and how that dictates where you end up in life in a way.
Yeah, I guess just explaining a little bit more on that. Since we're in the Posse program, our mentor for that was also our academic advisor, which allowed us to get really close with our professor. But I think for me, I was kind of like Bella, where I went into college knowing I wanted to do international relations. But the good thing is that, the academic advisor that, students are usually paired with come from different areas of studies. So, if our mentor actually is the organic chemistry professor, so that has nothing to do with what I want to do, and or nor what Joy wants to do, but it kind of helps you approach like academics in a different way, not just as a number of credits that you have to obtain throughout your 4 years, but more of like, like JD was saying in the beginning, a passion you want to discover, at least for you, and as a foundation for your career. So I think that diversity in who is leading you and their different interests helps you also branch out, or stay in the same path but try new things. So like for me, I took international relations my first year at Hamilton and took a couple government courses, but I also paired that with dance and with French, which I declared as a minor as well. So there's definitely that freedom.
I think a lot of the serendipitous relationships that come out of this advising piece is just about being able to see something from maybe a different angle or a way that you hadn't thought of it before, and your advisors will really give you the chance to do that. Outside of that formal advising relationship, that formal relationship that you have with your faculty, how else have you worked with faculty to explore your interests, maybe in finding research opportunities or discussing possible courses to take, or perhaps industries or jobs that you might be interested in? Who has one of those kind of experiences they'd like to discuss?
Yeah, so I developed a really strong relationship with my bio professor. So in the first semester, I took a course. It was called Neurobiology and Animal Behavior. And the professor of the course I just connected with really well. And so over the break, the winter break, I just got in contact with him and just started talking to him about like research opportunities and ways that I can get involved. And he was more than happy to just accommodate me and put me in his lab. So we were studying like behavior changes in fruit flies. So it was very interesting. I'm able to put that stuff on my resume just because like a lot of grad schools will want to see that as a first year student, I've gotten involved in research. But that was specifically just research opportunities. My bio professors also just sat down with me and spent like an hour planning out my entire just like course load for the coming semesters, at least in terms of my major. So even though I haven't declared a major yet, he's kind of like my major advisor already, just because he's helping me sort of plan my next few semesters out with me, which is just really helpful.
Who else has got some research in here? Nicole, I think you do, right?
Yes, I do. And like Nick, I also first semester got the opportunity to perform some research, which led into the summer all throughout my sophomore year. And I would, I guess, just say that at Hamilton, because of the small student to faculty ratio, it's possible to be able to create these long-lasting relationships, and to just, take a class. I really enjoyed my first international relations course, and I went up to the professor and I asked, I showed interest in research, and then she reached out to me. So I think that it's possible, if you're willing, if you're determined, to definitely obtain these opportunities even as a freshman, or as a first year. Sometimes, you think that it's only for people that are already graduating, or in other cases at other schools, graduate students, but Hamilton offers the opportunity to engage in these opportunities if you're willing to be proactive. So.
Yeah, and I think you make an important point there. Is right at Hamilton, we're only giving out undergraduate degrees. You're only getting your BA here, so there's no graduate students. There's no students working on their doctoral degrees, so you're not competing with grad students for precious and few research opportunities that are generally held for those kinds of students. You have the ability to get that research experience as an undergraduate, which is something that's pretty unique to a place like Hamilton. I was talking a little earlier back in the intro about the writing intensive courses, right? The writing requirement. I'd like somebody to talk about the courses that you've taken to fulfill your writing requirement, and what was it about them that kind of led you to select them as one or more of your 3 writing classes?
Yeah, so I've already exceeded my writing intensive requirements. I'm like 6 total, I think. And the 2 that I took my freshman fall, one was on American politics, and the other was on American freedom and religious thought. And so for these, they vary drastically. You think, oh, writing intensives, you're going to be writing X amount of papers, but each professor, that's up to them to decide how they want to, what defines a writing intensive. So for the religious studies class, we had a couple of assignments where we had a research paper as well as a reflective essay, and then also just different comparative essays with different biblical texts and all that, compared to my government class, which is more research focused, more outlined and structured in that way. But some can be as I'm sure Bella knows, like creative as you want it to be versus or as rigid as some government papers might be. But and both varied. Every single class I've taken that's writing intensive, there's no set mold for what that is. And I think that's great and fascinating also, is that with Hamilton, you could have a completely different experience depending on the professor, even if you're taking the same class as your friend, which is great.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I just wanted to add on that also the writing intensives, you are obviously just getting experience writing at the college level, but they're also really focused on revision and making you a better writer and figuring out that writing process. So I've taken a lot of writing intensives. I've taken some in the literature department, but you're actually only allowed to take 2 out of the 3 required within your major. So I've also taken one in psychology and one in religious studies. But those, yeah, completely different kinds of writing, but you get to work through multiple drafts with the professor, which I think is really, really helpful, just understanding what the expectations are and how you can meet them. And the writing center has also been really helpful in that regard. But I don't know, it can sound kind of daunting that you just have to write these college level essays right away, but you do have a lot of support and a lot of help from your professor and from the school.
Yeah, and so Bella mentioned the Writing Center. So let's just take a minute to talk about some of the resources on campus for academics, right? Like the Writing Center, the Oral Communication Center, right? We don't necessarily expect that you're going to come here being able to write at top stellar level. So we know that this is going to be an iterative process, something that you're going to build on during your time here. So maybe can somebody walk me through what your Writing Center experience has been, Writing Center appointments or Oral Communication Center appointments, and how that has helped you improve your communication skills?
Yeah, I think for me, like coming into college, I was a little bit nervous about my own, I questioned my own writing skills, and I feel like the Writing Center really helped me improve in that area. Not only were the people which are students, that are appointed by professors to help other students with their own writing, they're very qualified, but they sit with you. They try to understand where you're coming from to develop your thought process more eloquently on paper. And for me, it really helped me. I ended up writing like a 15-page paper my first semester at Hamilton, which I mean, could be a lot, could not, but like coming in, I had never really written like a whole argument just in 15 pages. So that was an achievement for me. And since then, like it's been, I've had a whole new perspective on writing. And it's helped me a lot, now as a junior, you're applying for more outside internships and just kind of developing your career forward. I think the Writing Center really helps you be able to, take that transferable skill and whatever you'd like to accomplish later on after Hamilton.
Now, I know a lot of you came to Hamilton having a pretty good idea of what you wanted to do, but and maybe this could also be applicable to finding a minor too. But was there any point in time when you kind of had an aha moment when you said, "Oh, this is really what I want to do"? It kind of either solidified that or made you, say, "Yeah, you know what, I want to pick this up as a minor."
I generally knew that I wanted to major in government, but minors was kind of up in the air. I really went into that saying, hey, this is open curriculum. Let me take some classes. I was on the fence between religious studies minor and Africana studies minor, and then ended up opting for the Africana studies because I took so many classes in that these past 2 years. Excellent professors, especially in the Africana studies department. But with that, took one class just because I had to fill my course registration period. I needed one more class and ended up falling in love with it. And so with that, I basically filled the requirements in just like 2 semesters. But that's kind of my experience with open curriculum is like, I kind of thought I would like it. And then I ended up loving it the second I got into it, which is, again, not unique to me, I'd say.
So for those of you who have declared your major, once you declared that, right, your advising relationship changes a little bit. You now get an advisor from that major area of study who's going to work with you for those last 2 years, right? Making sure you get those classes. How has that major advisor relationship maybe different from the relationship you have with your first advisor?
I think personally, it's made it a little bit better. Not that the first academic advisor wasn't helpful, because it definitely was. I would just say it's, a little bit more structured. I think as you, go through the years, you kind of have more of a plan of what you want to do, especially after like your first 2 years at Hamilton. So I think having that academic advisor that specializes in the area you want to go into is very helpful, not just for your own classes at Hamilton, but also, internship opportunities, work, jobs, whatever it is that you'd like to go into. I, like Nick, I think mentioned, I think I formed that relationship really early on just because I started taking government classes as early as my first year. So I knew my academic advisor before I was assigned them. So it was, really easy to have personable conversations, and the process ran very smoothly.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go.
But yeah, I just wanted to add quickly that also your major advisor is also usually the person that you work for on your thesis, which is like your capstone project at the end of your 4 years. And I think just having that person who is in the discipline that you're going into, you can talk about your thesis. I've started just like having those beginning conversations now, and then you'll go through those last 2 years and they'll know what you want to do and they can work with you really closely on that final project, which I think is really helpful in a different way than my first advisor was. My first advisor was really helpful with like exploring and figuring out what do I want to do. But now that I know, I think having that really specific support is really helpful.
So we've talked at a very high level about open curriculum, but I know that, and some of the questions that I've also seen filtering in here through the chat is that there's a lot of interest in kind of the nuts and bolts of the academic experience. Can you, a couple of you, talk about your course schedules during a typical semester? Like how many classes are you taking, how often they meet, right? Labs versus lectures, and kind of the availability of classes?
Yeah, so I normally take 4 lecture classes, and then the labs as a STEM major, they kind of vary. So like my first semester I took 2, This past semester I took 1, and then next semester I'm actually taking 0. Um, but yeah, I normally take 4 classes. They meet either like in 45-minute intervals 3 times a week, or an hour and 15-minute intervals twice a week. And then the labs are normally like anywhere from 2 to 4 hours long, but they only meet once a week, sometimes once every other week. So it's really going to depend on just the choices that you make in terms of your classes. If you want the longer classes that meet less times, then you're able to choose that. If you want to have your 45-minute classes that meet 3 times a week, you're able to choose that as well. So it's just basically depending on what your preference is.
Yeah, I'd say just like any school, there are going to be your popular classes that everyone's going to try and get. So those might fill up around registration time. But for the most part, I've never really had those horror stories that you might hear where people get 0 classes that they wanted to shoot for going into registration time. And this past semester I had a pretty nice schedule where I only had class on Tuesday and Thursday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I could focus on homework and just some downtime, honestly. And then other semesters I've had it where, class at 8:30 a.m. or some people might have class where you start at 11 o'clock, which is great. But yeah, I think even if you can't, so maybe sometimes you can reach out to your professor and their class might be full, but they're kind enough where they can give you some good options that kind of relate to what they were talking about or similar enough. So that's like part of that community that you're getting at Hamilton. Like, even though, we try to shoot for low class numbers. So typically speaking, not everyone's going to get the class, obviously, right? So luckily professors or students that have taken those classes are approachable enough where you can reach out to them, they can help you out, which is great.
Let's talk about class sizes for a moment, right? We've got a pretty small student faculty ratio, right? About 9 to 1. What are typical class sizes like for you for lectures versus discussion-based courses?
So personally, for me, the largest class size I've had is probably 20 people, and then on average, it's been about 8, which is great. So it's more pressure on you to do the readings and stay on top of your work because the professor will call on you, that's for sure. But I'd much prefer that over some 300-person class that you might have in some lecture hall.
I think the largest class, or the largest class at Hamilton I've been a part of has probably been in the economics department. It was probably like 35, I think 40 max, but it definitely does not pass that amount. And even then, it was still, very, even though it was lecture, like the professor was still very interactive. People still raised their hands, everyone answered. And it was, again, the open door policy of office hours with every professor makes it, if you didn't understand a topic, you can just reach out to them, have a one-on-one session, and they'll probably help you out in whatever you're having trouble with. And yeah, most of the writing intensive are really small, which also make it very beneficial for, when you have to develop your ideas for research, etc. So it's been a fun time being able to create those relationships, and you also get to transfer that to the students that you're taking the class with, because you make relationship with the professor, but I think also with the students around you, and just because it's very small, you can talk about the material and meet up probably easier than at a larger school.
So I've got one here. I think I'd like everybody to answer, just because I think it'd be fun to see what your experiences have been. But can you tell me a class that you took that was the most fun or surprising, and then also a class that you took that pushed you outside of your comfort zone?
I can start this one off. So most fun and surprising was actually one of my writing intensive courses. I took a course called Food and Literature and Film. And so like the first half of the semester, we were reading bunch of different like texts about food and stuff like that. But then we got to the film unit, and we were like watching like Ratatouille and like analyzing that and writing essays about it. So it was definitely a lot of fun. It really had me like look at certain like it made me analyze films just like differently than what I was used to. So definitely a lot of fun. And then I guess one that pushed me outside of my comfort zone, I took this past semester a Gov course called American Political Process. And I really would not have imagined taking a Gov course anywhere else. But I figured might as well just give it a shot. And it really did push me outside my comfort zone because I'm not really a government person, but I did really enjoy the class. It was very interactive, very interesting as well. So it was nice to be able to just go outside and just explore new options.
I'd say for me, the most fun would probably be contemporary dance. I'm just not used to moving my body in those types of ways. I'm not the most flexible guy, so it was fun and also challenging at the same time. And then academically challenging in that way is probably democratic theory. That was like a 6-person class, and the professor was very on top of you, as well as just asking big picture questions. Like how do you define justice and what is freedom, and all those questions that have no real answer. So that really challenged me, and you had to be prepared for class, or else you couldn't participate. And some of those conversations were pretty deep and fruitful in that way. So
personally, I think one of the most creative courses I've taken, which it wasn't a full semester course, but I still counted, was ice skating, which fulfills the PE requirement, which is not always focused on actual physical movement, but it's kind of to broaden your experiences throughout your time at Hamilton. And it was really, really fun because our professor, or the individual leading the class, was actually the varsity ice hockey coach. So I'm sure he had a great time, helping us amateur students try to skate backwards. But it was really fun. And the class was small as well. So again, made for great laughs. And then one of the more challenging courses was when I took last semester, which was European in the world, or European affairs in the world. And this one, I was the only sophomore in the course. And I knew that, coming into it, I haven't really taken a lot of European focused government courses. So I knew that I had to, read a lot of history on my own downtime. But in the end, I feel like my writing definitely improved. And it helped me at least, narrow my focus as a world politics student on, what I'll write my thesis in and what I'd like to specialize in later on in my career. So it was good in that way.
Yeah. I think probably the most fun / surprising class I've taken at Hamilton was called Flash Narrative, which was a class in the lit department that's focused on like really, really short fiction. So like 1 page or less than a page. But it's taught by Professor Tina Hall, who's also experienced in like book art and making books. So the other half of the class was like folding paper into tiny books. And we also worked in the letterpress a lot, which is the printing press that Hamilton has. And it was so fun to like do this really hands-on stuff. We like made cyanotypes, just like prints using the sun. And like all that stuff that was basically just art, but also in like, we also talked about it in an academic sense and like through literature and what it means to combine those things was really fun. And then challenging or outside of comfort zone, I think probably was a class I took this semester in women and gender studies, which was about feminist theory and then applying that to literature, but just the pedagogy of the class was completely different than anything I'd done before. It was really focused on like ourselves. We talked about like personal experience and combined it with like really complex theory. But it was just, I don't know, it was a very vulnerable class. It was really small and I really got to know people more than I have in a lot of other academic settings. So I think I really enjoyed that one as well.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing those. I think, having those personal stories about those particular classes can help our prospective students get a better feeling for what academics is going to be like I want to go back. We talked a couple of minutes before about the relatively small class sizes that you're going to have. So obviously there's a lot of opportunities for getting to know your faculty, getting to know your professors. Let's talk a little bit about office hours. How have you used their office hours, and how approachable have you found the faculty to be generally?
Yeah, I love office hours, just because, you know, it's you're not just focused on your grade, right? For me, when we could have in-person office hours, I'd be in there for maybe like 2 hours, and you know, I had one professor open up about his life, and it wasn't just about my grade on a paper. And so there were a couple times when one professor, he sees me in the dining hall, he sits down with me, and we just end up talking about, you know, it could be spiritual stuff, it could be whatever. And I even go to church with one of my professors. So I love, my favorite part about Hamilton has to be the relationship that you can have with your professors. And they're so approachable to the point that they're almost like wanting you to come talk to them and hang out with them in a way, which I think is very unique, especially when I talk to some of my friends back home. They just don't have that same experience. And I think it not only motivates you to be involved in the class, but it gets you more comfortable in the conversations that you have in the class. And you feel comfortable enough to explore, maybe be vulnerable in ways that you wouldn't if you didn't know the professor as well. But for me, office hours, they've always been like at least, 45 minutes just talking and talking, which is great.
Anybody else have anything to add about office hours they've taken advantage of?
Yeah, I think for me as well, I relate to Joe in that sense. More so with my French classes, they've all been great professors. I mean, same with my government, but I guess because French was completely new to me, it was interesting being able to connect with the professors, some who have studied in France and know different, cultural experiences, and just talk about, what kind of drew me towards studying that and just, applying it moving forward. And I think that all the professors are pretty accessible at Hamilton. They're very friendly. I haven't encountered any that, aren't. And I think it's a great opportunity to also network, because sometimes people, you know, larger schools struggle to do that when you can have, as your own professor, it could also be your boss slash your friend slash, so it's something that you wouldn't get anywhere else. And I think Hamilton fosters that sense of community.
So another kind of nuts and bolts question here. This one from one of our attendees about studying, right, and working outside of the classroom to do classwork. Do you study more in groups or on your own? What is the kind of the time outlay required for classes, and how do you go about studying? And maybe even share your favorite study spot on campus, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can tackle that. So I think as if one versus a group of people, I think it's really a mix. For me personally, I like to do both. So I do spend usually hours in the morning studying by myself when my friends are in classes or things like that. And then in the evenings, if I have more studying to do, I like to do it with my friends. There's also times when I get together with people in my class, either if we're working on a group project or it's just like a study group. The TAs are really good at organizing study sessions sometimes as well. And that's really nice. And then my favorite study spot is, I guess it's not called Opus anymore, but Old Opus, which is still a coffee shop now, but it's a coffee shop at Hamilton. And it's right next to my dorm, and it's like a 2-minute walk. And I spend like 8 a.m. to noon in there almost every day. And I really love it in there. It's my favorite study spot.
Yeah, I think it's now called the Fojo Cafe. I think we have Fojo South and Fojo North. So, yep. Well, so for the other three of you, what study spots? Let's give some fun study spots.
I gotta go with KTSA. If you guys are not too familiar with it, it's the all glass building on Dark Side. It's beautiful for me because some days, I'm not gonna say I do this every day, but if I'm feeling extremely motivated, I wake up like at 7, or 6 a.m. so you can kind of see the sunrise coming up there, and it's just the way the sunlight or how the snow reflects off the glass. It's beautiful to me. So that's probably my favorite spot to study.
I gotta say the science center study rooms in the back. So there are these big study rooms that I think normally they're meant for like 3 people, but this past year it was only like 1 person in there. So I got to just like go in there by myself. I loved going during the sunset because you just like can see the sun go down through just the big windows that they have there, and it overlooks like the city of Utica. So I would basically just spend the entire evening just studying there, doing any work that I needed to. Sometimes even just like sitting there and like looking out, just because it was just a really like tranquil space to be.
I think personally, my spot has kind of switched around a lot just because I like to change my setting depending on how I feel. So if I want, more to see more people, then I'll probably go to the library, or if I want something more closed off, then I'll go to Science Center, which is beautiful as well. KTSA is also nice. So I think it just depends. Also the weather, whatever is closer to my room. If it's snowing, I'm probably not going to walk across campus, but yeah, I think the whole campus lends itself for great study spots. So it depends what you're feeling.
Talk a little bit about the intersection of your academic interests and your extracurricular interests. Does anybody have an example of how maybe what they're interested in academically has overlapped or been complemented by an extracurricular interest and maybe impacted a club or an activity that you're part of on campus?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned before that I work for the literary magazine on campus, but I'm a creative writing major myself, so I like to write poetry and fiction, stuff like that. But it's also been really nice working on the literary magazine. I'm the poetry editor, so I get to read all the things that students are making on campus, and it's just really fun to see what the whole student body is writing and be able to publish it in an official magazine is really fun. And you can totally get involved if you're not a creative writing major. It's by no means limited, but it's nice to have that complement of seeing students work and being able to publish it.
I think personally too, I was a part of the student assembly at Hamilton, and that was a really cool experience because, even within my tour guiding job, it kind of allowed me to use international relations in a more strategic communications focus, with a more strategic communications focus, and so I think it helps you develop this sort of multifaceted like love for what you do, and so I liked it because it combined the more everyday with the more government, and I got to represent the students on campus. So it was a fun time.
So for those of you interested in learning more about student life and clubs and activities on campus, I'm just going to do a quick plug for a Virtually Hamilton event that we have next week. Next Thursday, the 22nd, same time, 7 o'clock Eastern time, we're doing a Student Life on College Hill Virtually Hamilton event. So if you want to learn more about those kind of things, head to our hamilton.edu/discover, our Discover website, and sign up again for next Thursday's event. Well, let me dive into some questions that we have been getting through the chat from our participants that we have here. I kind of think this one is interesting. How, knowing what you know, how is Hamilton's open curriculum and our approach received by employers for internships, for example, or for grad schools if you're doing grad school research? Anybody have anything to say in this area?
So part of the DC program, the biggest part is having an internship. So Nicole and I, we've been applying to a lot of internships and having some interviews. And for me personally, the couple interviews I've had, they have mentioned Hamilton. And they know that they care a lot about writing. Like I've applied to a couple research-oriented internships, and they know what Hamilton's about in that way. From Miami, personally, not too many people know about Hamilton. But what I've realized is the people that should know about Hamilton, they know that it's really good, like employers and stuff like that. Like the job I'm currently working for, that was the first thing they mentioned, like, oh, Hamilton, So even though they don't know the particulars, let's say about open curriculum, the reputation of Hamilton, I think, carries on into a lot of different ways to where you're respected in ways that, that they expect a lot more out of you, and they trust you more with responsibilities in that way.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, I think just technically we do have a lot of support systems for grad school. So if you're in the pre-law or pre-health track, I guess, we don't have specific majors for that, but we do have advisors that will work with you to get all those requirements out of the way for grad school. And then on the humanities side, I think the open curriculum is really an asset, because I think those schools are not necessarily looking for what you're majored in, but they're looking for this person who is a good student, and you can show through your Hamilton record and through your curriculum and the class you've taken that you really care about what you're doing. You've studied it in these ways, you've taken these classes, and then you can show the other things that you're good at. And I think just like that well-rounded person and student, and also the writing and communication, is really helpful going forward in jobs and in grad school.
We had a question here about experiential learning, and is it common, and does it bolster the impact of the open curriculum? And I would say, Joe and Nicole are good examples. They're going to do the experiential learning piece in Washington, D.C. here. We have a program in D.C. That combines some experiential learning, some internships with classroom-based learning. We've got a program like that in New York City too. But just in terms of experience, yes, right? About 96% of our students will have some kind of a career-related experience before they leave Hamilton, an internship, a research opportunity, a job shadowing opportunity, something that connects them to real life outside of the classroom work. And so it goes hand in hand with the open curriculum and preparing for what happens after Hamilton. And just a perfect example for another plug for another virtual event, but in the beginning of August, I think it's August 3rd, we're doing a session on the Career Center and working with the Alumni Network and finding those internship or job opportunities. So I do encourage you to turn out for that session at the beginning of August. I think that will address a lot of the experiential learning and career preparation questions that we get. I think I've got time for one more here before we close here. And I like this one because it talks a little bit about what we talk about all the time in the admission office, and that is knowing thyself. What is the way that you think that the school motto, know thyself, gets incorporated into our curriculum? Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot when I was first applying to Hamilton, and it showed itself once I got there. I think the motto, know thyself, applies in both social and academic scenes, right? Like, let's say, easy, we've talked about it, open curriculum, know thyself, figure out who you are, take what you want, and no one's going to say anything or judge you for what you do, what you're doing, what you love. And then also social scene wise, you could either, hang out with your friends on Friday night or study in the library on Friday night, in either way, you're figuring out who you are, what your interests are. And again, no one's going to judge you. I think that's the best part about Hamilton, is that it's a pretty non-judgmental place. And people are really encouraging for you to try whatever interest that may be, whether it's volunteering in Utica or starting this club that might not be the most popular club or something like that. But I think my personal experience at Hamilton is you can do what you want and not care, and people won't judge you for it. And I think that really just brings in that whole community that Hamilton's all about. And you want to be there. That's the best part about Hamilton.
Well, go ahead, Nicole.
Personally, I've also seen it in the more financial aspect. And this comes with the opportunities that you have at Hamilton. So I've seen it, like, you only get to know yourself or know thyself if you have the opportunities accessible to you. And I think Hamilton has helped me in that sense to be able to achieve and to experience new opportunities that wouldn't be available to me otherwise, that wouldn't, let me develop my passions for certain areas of interest. So.
All right, so one last thing I'd like to ask. I want all of you to kind of rewind in your heads back to when you were in that summer between your junior and your senior year in high school, and think about the shoes of putting yourself in the shoes of our attendees tonight. what is one piece of advice that you have for these rising seniors as they get ready to start applying to colleges later this fall? We'll go around the room here. Who wants to start? Yep.
I guess I'll start. I would say, I know this sounds very corny, but be yourself. And the reason why I say this is if you're taking advantage of the interview process, which I highly encourage you to do so, you want to ask as many questions and be as personable as you can be, but also you want to be real, because essentially you want to make sure that the person that's interviewing you, gets to see the side of you you can't write on paper. And also you want to, kind of keep an eye out to see whether the people interviewing you really care and accept for you, because then that also reflects how the campus community is. And I think that was a part that drew me to Hamilton as well. My process was very close knit. I don't know if that's the right word to describe it, but I got to share parts of my experiences with the interviewers, and they really cared. So that reflective of how my experience would be once I entered Hamilton, because even though the school chooses you, essentially you choose the school. So just don't forget that as well.
Good point.
I would say my advice pertains to college essay. I'd say be as open, honest, and goofy, and be really passionate through that essay. And I think you stand out more than just the typical, okay, this is what I've done, this is who I am. But I think if you're open as deeply as you can be, and as passionate, and it just pours through your essay, I think that'll help you out more than anything. And staying true to yourself, and figuring out what culture you want to be a part of, because you can kind of get that when you look up schools and stuff, what the vibe might be at a school. And I think always trust your intuition in that sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Joe just said. I think, I don't know, you're gonna hear a lot of numbers. Everybody's gonna tell you all these different things, and I think my advice would probably be to go with your gut or your intuition, which I think obviously you have to plan ahead. There are things that you're gonna have to look at, but I think at some point there's just sort of that spark. It happened for me, and I think if you just wait for it and you're open to these new experiences, you're gonna realize at some point where you're supposed to be, and you're gonna just be confident that you're making the right choice when you do make that choice, because I don't think you can really go wrong if you're trusting your intuition.
Yeah, I totally agree with Bella. My piece of advice is just ask questions. Ask as many questions as you possibly can. Like Nicole said, even though the school is choosing you, you're also choosing the school. So you're going to be spending the next 4 years wherever you end up, and you're gonna you should ask just students, professors, your admissions rep, just about the experience here. I would say if you know a student who goes to an institution that you're interested in, just ask them about the student experience, because that's probably going to be your main aspect of your life on campus. So yeah, just ask around, ask as many questions as you can. If you think that it's a stupid question, it's probably not, because you're going to want to know the answer to it. So don't hesitate to reach out and contact people who you think would be able to help you through your process.
All right. Thank you, Nick and Bella and Joe and Nicole, all good, solid advice. And thank you for your time tonight and sharing your knowledge about Hamilton with our prospective students. I just want to say there are more virtually Hamilton sessions coming up. Like I mentioned, we've got one about student life, one about career networking and advising. There's one about tips for writing that college essay. So go to hamilton.edu/discover, go to the Virtually Hamilton tab and register to attend those. I'll follow up with you with an email tomorrow. It'll have some links to academic information and open curriculum information that will be helpful for you. And we'll also have a link to the recording of this session if you want to share it with your family, or if you couldn't make all of it, you'll be able to replay it. So thank you all for spending a piece of your evening, of your Tuesday evening with us tonight. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that I will get to read some of your applications later this fall. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.